Welcome in the host of Reiter's Block here on CBS Sports HQ. That is Bill Reiter. Bill, biggest takeaway from this wild game in Portland is what?
Life is unfair, and if you're a Portland Trailblazers fan, it's just you're scratching your head wondering how the Warriors won this game. You had a 17-point lead. The Warriors did not shoot well from the three-point line. It felt like you had some control and some momentum. That crowd was going crazy, but this is what Golden State does. They don't give up. They don't panic. It doesn't matter how far down they are. They've been through so many wars against so many teams and so many stars that it's almost this sense of inevitability they carry with them, even on the road, even when they're down. It's the same Warrior story we see year after year after year. You cannot count these guys out.
Bill, Steph Curry didn't sit in the second half for overtime, and he'd done that against the Rockets too when KD had gotten hurt. What did you learn about Steph Curry, a guy who's already won 2 MVPs and now averaged 37 a game in these Western Conference Finals?
Well, I learned that he can be called for traveling in the NBA, which was a new one. I mean, look, Steph is amazing, and I've covered a lot of Warriors basketball games, a lot of playoff games. But this is really the first run in the first season where Steph Curry, since KD went down in particular in this postseason, has had to log serious minutes in both of those MVP seasons. Curry and a lot of his teammates would often sit out a huge chunk or the entirety of the fourth quarter. So we know now that Steph Curry, the wear and the tear of a long postseason run, the kind of minutes most teams and players have to put up, he is not daunted by it. And you said it, the guy had an incredible game, a triple-double along with teammate Draymond Green. What we learned is the wear, the tear, the miles, the minutes, all of the burden of having to carry this team. It is not too much for Steph Curry, not on the road, not playing that entire second half in overtime. He is up to that challenge.
Well, now they're going to be off for about a week and a half. Still not sure whether Kevin Durant returns, and I want to talk about the Blazers in a moment, but still not sure whether Kevin Durant returns or not for the finals. They a favorite no matter who they're playing with or without KD?
I think they are. I know that's sort of there's not a consensus on that around the NBA and NBA circles, but I certainly think they are. We forget sometimes that this is a team that won an NBA championship without Durant, that won 73 games without Durant. Durant clearly makes them better. And clearly Kevin Durant is such a force of nature offensively. And just in general, you want him on the team. But it's not like KD showed up and took these guys to the next level. He arrived in a championship team and became part of that process and that story. And we saw it again tonight. Klay Thompson played amazing defense on Damian Lillard at the end of that overtime. Draymond Green hit a huge three-point shot at the end of regulation. No, I'm sorry, in overtime to help win that game. 20% three-point shooter in this postseason, a triple-double. These guys are loaded. McKinney had a huge game and huge points late in the game. Kevon Looney had a huge game. Sean Livingston had some really nice minutes on the floor. This Warriors team is good enough to beat anybody in the NBA as long as they have either Durant or Steph Curry. And obviously, we saw tonight, they still have Steph Curry.
And in the second quarter, about 8.5 minutes left, the Warriors had already played 11 guys. So I think it's often overlooked how good of a job Steve Kerr does. That, all right, you play 11 guys with 8 minutes to go in the second quarter. It's just to make sure that those guys, in case something happens towards the end of the game, you need them, that they actually feel valuable out there on the floor. How would you assess Steve Kerr?
No, I think that's exactly right, and I think you're right. It is an overlooked part of what Kerr has done so well with this Warriors team. There are so many stars and there are so many egos that you've got to get a lot of guys, a lot of touches who believe that they're max players, who are max players, who are critical to their success. And you've got to keep some of these other guys in rhythm, feeling good about themselves. We know Kevon Looney earlier in the year didn't like where his role was at, didn't like the way that he felt like his minutes were handled. And Kerr's done a great job with him and other guys, bringing them along, keeping them involved. And you said it, making sure in a game like this where depth is going to matter, and they had to give up some depth to bring in Kevin Durant a few years ago, that those guys on the bench and those role players, if and when the time comes in an overtime, they're going to feel like they've been trusted enough that the moment's not too big for them.
5 straight finals appearances. Now, all alone in second place behind the Celtics, who went to 10 straight in the 50s and 60s. You have the words yet to sum up what this run is?
I mean, I've been lucky enough to be at every single finals that the Warriors have been a part of, and I know that it's hard to compare eras, but they're certainly the greatest, if we can call them dynasty. I think it is. They're a dynasty when they win this year, and it's not if, it's when. They're the greatest dynasty of this century. If you want to call the Spurs a dynasty, you'll spread out those 5 championships in the century. Maybe they're in the same ballpark. but we're looking at a level of history that is extraordinary, that is fun to watch, and that maybe, if not coming to an end, at least the sense of certainty isn't going to remain this year. Most people, and I talked to a source today around the NBA, they don't know what Durant's going to do. Most people think he's going to leave. So what we're seeing right now, this Warriors team, this might be the group we have next year. Who knows if it continues, but we should enjoy it while we can.
You're the Portland Trailblazers, Bill. Last year, swept in the first round by the Pelicans. This year, being swept is a little bit of a different story since it comes in the Western Conference Finals against one of the greatest teams of all time. But if you're the Portland Trailblazers, what do you take away from Game 4 and this series?
I want Kevin Durant to go to the Eastern Conference and Steph Curry to retire because we're 1-12 against these guys. I love what Portland's about. I think Neil O'Shea, the general manager, has done an amazing job building a team in a market where it is really difficult to recruit superstars, to recruit free agency. Obviously found gems in both McCollum and Lillard. I think they're the second best backcourt in the NBA behind the team that just beat them. We know they had some injury issues, but the Enes Kanter signing off of that buyout market when he was at the Knicks and was available, that turned to be a stroke of genius really for the last series. I think if you're the Trailblazers, and this is small consolation, you made an incredible run. You're building something that works. You have two superstars to build around, and you just have to hope, like the rest of the NBA, that the Warriors break up or they age quickly, because the fact is the Warriors have everybody's number in this league, but especially Portland's number, and that's just the reality for this Trailblazers team that put up a great fight and a hell of a run, and I'm sure they're tired of seeing Golden State in the postseason.
Yeah, I'd say. So now that's 3 times that they've beaten the Blazers en route to the NBA Finals. You said 2 stars. Myers Leonard would like to have a word with you. 25 points in the first half, had the career high. Next year, he's a bargain at $11.2 million. 3 stars, Bill, 3.
Yeah, if Myers can score 20 points in the second half of an elimination game, I'll tag a star. I'll put a star on it. But stars, as you know, show up in the second half in the fourth quarter and overtime. And look, that's another reason it's a heartbreaker for Portland. You get that kind of output first half or otherwise from that particular guy, and you're in your backcourt. And they did plays really, really well. Your actual stars play well. You should win that basketball game. So Myers, my guy, he had a hell of a performance, but I'm not going to tag you a star just yet. But I like where you're trending.
You talked about what Neil O'Shea has done putting together this team. Oftentimes you get to this point with the team, some will say, all right, let's shake things up, and it's usually with the head coach. What type of job do you think Terry Stotts has done, and should he continue with this group?
I think he's done an amazing job. I mean, I think you no more fire a coach for losing to the Warriors in the conference finals than you fire a coach back in the day for losing to LeBron James in the conference finals. People make that mistake. I don't think Neil O'Shea will. Now, it was an easier run than I think people expected it to be, in the sense that Denver, though a 2-seed, played really well, was inexperienced and young, and that gave this veteran team in Portland an opportunity. But Terry Stotts is one of the more highly regarded head coaches in the NBA. I voted for the guy, I think, twice on my ballot for Coach of the Year over the last 4 or 5 years. People around the league know what he can do. They know what he's about. And even though they didn't win a single game against the Warriors in this series, and they struggled against the Warriors, I think people recognize, and I think Neil O'Shea of all people will recognize this, because, again, Portland, not a place that Kevin Durant is putting on his short list, not a place that Kemba Walker is putting on his free agency short list, not a place that Anthony Davis is putting on his list of please trade me here in New Orleans. It is hard to recruit players, forget stars, players to Portland. That puts everybody under the 8 ball, and I think GM, the coach, everybody in the organization understands you have to grade on a curve as a result, and making this conference finals, that's a hell of an accomplishment for this team.
All right, it was a hell of an accomplishment for Steph Curry, averaging 37 in the conference finals, and Draymond was terrific. We don't have, like in baseball, you have the NLCS MVP, ALCS MVP. We don't have that in the NBA. Who would you give, though, Western Conference Finals MVP to?
That is a great question, because my brain is, part of me wants to give it to Draymond because he's been remarkable in this postseason. He's averaged almost twice as many points per game in the playoffs as he did in the regular season. He's been a machine defensively, the things that he's done. Damian Lillard talked about this after the Game 3 loss, about even when he gets past guys like Clay, there's Draymond Green. But man, Steph Curry and what he's done, MVP level, that beautiful game and ball movement is back. That Warriors team we saw 3 years ago before Durant arrived, and Steph is the reason for that. I'm going to give it to Steph by just the smallest of margins, but if I have a ballot in front of me, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be torn over it I'm going to turn it in at the very last second. brought in Steph's name down as I struggle not to write Draymond Green down.
Yeah, I would go with Steph also, and it's just wild that they're 5-0 without Durant in this postseason, 7-4 with Durant, and since he's been there now, well, now it's 31-1 without Durant. How do you explain that?
I think it's as simple as this. I think the Golden State Warriors, one of the best teams that we'd ever seen in the history of the game before Kevin Durant arrived. And I think a part of that, there's a lot of reasons, but a part of that is Steph Curry's presence and excellence off the floor as well as on the floor. And when KD came into Golden State, Steph was willing to really put away his ego, put away his shine, put away not his shots, but being the focal point, and allowed Durant to be the guy. And it made a lot of folks, it lulled a lot of people into forgetting how dominant this guy is. They don't have the depth they used to have, but they still have. And people think I'm crazy. I think Steph Curry is the second best player on the face of the earth. I've been saying it here and on the radio show for the last 2 or 3 years. I think Kevin Durant's probably the third best player on the face of the earth. Draymond Green gets up for the postseason. When the ball moves, it makes life easier on Klay Thompson. This Warriors team is absolutely dynamic, dangerous, and if not unbeatable, close to it, even without Kevin Durant, which is why there's this absurdity and unfairness when KD's healthy, what this team has been the last couple of years.
All right, so let's do the radio thing. Was Kevin Durant happy that the Warriors swept the Trailblazers?
Yeah, I saw that ridiculous tweet from one of the people in the business that nobody takes seriously. Yes, Kevin Durant was incredibly happy that, and by the way, for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, this means that Kevin Durant and his teammates can chill. Hopefully Durant gets better. They've got lots of time for the entire team to rest up. So if KD isn't healthy early on, Steph Curry's going to log fewer minutes because there's no Game 5. Klay Thompson's going to log fewer minutes because there's no Game 5, so on and so forth. Draymond Green and the rest of these teammates. I mean, KD, whatever his peculiarities, whatever his insecurities, and they exist. I mean, the guy's had fake burner accounts, and we've seen the way that he interacts sometimes, but he loves winning. He's an absolute competitor. He lives and dies for championships. It's why he came to Golden State. And that guy not just gets a ring, he's a huge part of a ring if and when the Warriors complete it. So, yeah, I don't know that KD's going to be a Warrior next year, but he's a Warrior up until free agency, and that means he was rooting, I'm sure, like crazy for his teammates to do what they did tonight.
Well, if he lives and dies with championships, then he really shouldn't be going anywhere, right?
Well, he lives and dies with championships, but he also thinks, and this is a whole other topic, I think he believes erroneously that if he goes to a place like New York City and pairs up with a star like Kyrie Irving, he's going to keep winning them and show the world that he was not some hanger-on with the Warriors. And I think that'll be a very rude awakening. You can covet something, you can love something, you can believe in something. It doesn't mean you're not a little self-delusional, and I think that's where KD's at if he leaves. I think he's leaving. People around the NBA think he's leaving, but it's not because he thinks he's going to go to New York, party at the clubs, and not win championships. It's because I think he overestimates his ability alone, or at least not with this group, to do the things that he's done in the Bay Area.
All right, so let's go back to some X's and O's from this game and spin it forward to the finals. So given the way that Steph played and Draymond played, and the offense really runs through Draymond, you can just see by his assist numbers, and he had 5 in the first 8 minutes of this game. Is there a team that the Warriors would rather see in the NBA Finals, Raptors or Bucks?
Yeah, I mean, they're both, the 3 best net ratings in the NBA this year in this order were the Warriors, were the Bucks, and were the Raptors. I think both of those teams present really serious challenges against Golden State. And I don't think significant challenges. I mean, the Warriors are still favored, but those are both teams that are really interesting against the Dubs. I know most of my colleagues are going to say Toronto is the more dangerous team because guys like Siakam and certainly Kawhi Leonard, defensively, athletically, physically, what they can do on the perimeter against Klay and Steph and Draymond, and if Kevin Durant's healthy, KD. But for me, I think it's Milwaukee. You have to be able to shoot the three-point shot. Milwaukee's very good at that. Milwaukee, the best defensive team in the NBA this year, also 4th in offensive rating, so they're a top 4 team in both respects. They do an amazing job surrounding Giannis with shooters. I think Malcolm Brogdon is a huge X factor, and we saw him start to play really well in this series. And I know Giannis is unguardable for everybody in the NBA. I get it. But he's also unguardable for the Warriors. And whoever's trying to do that, if KD's healthy, if it's Draymond, that is so much energy. That is so much you have to throw at that guy just to slow Giannis Antetokounmpo down, that's going to take something away from you on the offensive side, whoever you're throwing in his direction. I think Mike Budenholzer is by far the superior coach to Nick Nurse in Toronto. So for me, if I'm gambling my own money, if I have to make a bet, if I have to pick somebody else, I'm saying that the Milwaukee Bucks have the better chance than Toronto.
Yeah, I'd also think, though, experience would come into play. And you can look at it in this series with all the deep deficits that the Warriors faced. They were down again 17 in this one. They were a plus 61 in the second half of this series in the Western Conference Finals against the Blazers. I think that has a lot to do with experience and, sure, superior talent, but experience. So in the finals against the Bucks, I would play that experience card, being the Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem is with that logic is that the Toronto Raptors' experience in the postseason has always been failure outside of Kawhi Leonard, who, granted, the second youngest Finals MVP in the history of the game behind Magic Johnson, but we've seen this. I mean, Kawhi going 10 of 25 or 10 of 27 or 11 of 28, that's not efficiency, and that's not the load that he wants to carry. It's a lot of minutes they're putting on a guy who missed all of last season. I think experience is incredibly important. I also think the Warriors have so much of it in championships, the heartbreak against LeBron James and the Cavs, that 3-1 comeback, what they've done this year. I don't think that there's a big difference between what Kawhi Leonard with his experience brings and the rest of that Bucks team, because the Warriors are going to dominate you in spades on the experience front. For me, the best basketball team is the one you want to throw. And I'll say this too, I think that experience card is really important. We saw that with Denver. Once you make an NBA Finals, especially the road to the East, it's been really challenging. Not for the Bucks, but in general. And this series is going to be a challenge. That creates a real level of confidence, a real level of certainty. It doesn't guarantee anything, but I think a lot of those nerves and a lot of the experience you need, you build some of that if you make a run to the finals. Young team in the first round or the second round, I think experience is a real Achilles heel. Young team with an MVP and the coach of the year that makes the finals, I think that team's pretty dangerous.
He's Bill Reiter. Bill, thank you.
Anytime.